The abandonment 800 words. The desert was silent, except for the sound of the wind. A pale red sky stretched far above, and the ground was dry and cracked, as if life had left this place long ago. In the middle of this emptiness, she lay therein. Alien woman, weak and trembling. Her clothes were torn, her skin covered with dust, and her eyes filled with confusion. High above, a silver ship cut across the sky. Its engines roared, leaving a trail of smoke. Ouch! She raised her hand toward it, her fingers shaking. That was her family ship, her own blood, her people. But instead of rescuing her, instead of helping her stand, they were leaving. The ship grew smaller and smaller, a cold reminder that she was unwanted. Her lips moved, whispering something. In her strange tongue, a plea, a cry. But the sky did not answer. The ship was gone. Silence returned. The woman tried to push herself up. Her legs failed. She collapsed again. Pain spread across her body. She had been abandoned not in a city, not near safety, but here. In this wasteland where death waited for the weak, a shadow moved across the sand. She lifted her head, her heart racing. Far in the distance, dark shapes circled in the sky. At first, they looked like birds. But as they drew closer, their wings stretched wide, their bodies huge. Their cries filled the air, deep, sharp screeches that made the ground tremble. They were vultures. Not the kind of birds humans know, but alien predators with long hooked beaks and glowing yellow eyes. Their wings beat heavy against the hot air, sending dust storms swirling. The woman's eyes widened. She understood. She was prey now. Her breathing grew fast. She tried again to move. With great effort, she dragged herself across the sand, inch by inch. Each movement was slow. The vultures circled lower. Their cries grew louder. They could smell her weakness, her blood, her fear. The desert became a trap. No water, no shelter. Only endless land and these monsters above. She thought of her family again. The ship lifting away. Their faces turned cold as stone. Why had they left her? What crime had she committed? She searched her memory, but only pain came. She was different. Yes, she always felt different. But did difference mean she deserved death? Her heart beat harder. The vultures swooped closer, their wings cutting through the air like knives. One landed on a rock nearby. Its talons dug deep into the stone. Its beak opened wide, letting out a hiss. The woman froze. She wanted to scream, but her throat was dry. Her vision blurred. The heat of the desert, the pain in her body, the fear of death all pressed against her. Her strength was fading fast. She fell again, her cheek pressing against the burning sand. The sun above gave no mercy. Her body felt heavy, her mind slipping. But then, a sound. It was faint at first. Not the screech of vultures, not the roar of a ship. It was different. A voice, strange, deep, steady. A human voice. The woman's eyes opened slightly. She could not understand the words, but she felt them. Someone was speaking, someone alive. A shadow crossed over her again, but this one was not a vulture. She blinked, her eyes adjusting. A figure stood against the sunlight. A man. His outline was sharp, his body tall. On his back hung a pack, and in his hand, something long and metallic, perhaps a weapon. He stepped closer. His boots crunched against the sand. His eyes narrowed as he looked down at her. For a long moment, he said nothing. His face was unreadable. His hand tightened around his weapon, ready for danger. He had never seen a creature like her before. The vultures cried again, circling above them both. The man looked up, his jaw tightening. He understood the danger. The woman raised her hand weakly toward him, her fingers shaking. She whispered again, her alien tongue carrying no meaning to his ears. But her eyes spoke louder than her words. They begged. They pleaded. The man's gaze shifted from her to the sky, and then back to her again. He could walk away. He could. Leave her here. It was not his fight, not his problem. She was not human, and yet something in her eyes held him still. Something in the way she reached for life, even while death closed in. The vultures screamed again, this time diving lower. Their wings tore the air apart, dust rising around them. The man raised his weapon. His voice echoed across the desert. "This isn't your prey." The woman's breath caught. Her vision dimmed, but hope flickered inside her chest. For the first time since her family left, she felt she was not alone. The desert was no longer silent. It was alive with danger, with choice, with suspense. And her story had just begun. The human stranger, 800 words, the desert wind grew stronger, carrying sharp grains of sand across the open ground. The alien woman's eyes remained half-closed, her body weak and heavy. She barely understood what was happening, but one thing was clear: she was not alone anymore. The figure before her stood tall, blocking the burning sun with his shadow. A human. His clothes were dusty, his boots worn, and a scarf covered part of his face to protect against the heat. His hand gripped a strange weapon, long, black, and dangerous. His eyes were sharp, scanning her with suspicion. For a moment, the man did not move. He studied her carefully, as if she were a puzzle. Was she a threat? Was she a trap? Or just a dying creature left behind? The vultures shrieked above them, circling closer. Their wings beat like drums in the air, growing impatient. The man tilted, his head slightly upward, watching them. He knew the look in those eyes, hungry eyes. They would not wait much longer. He lowered his gaze back to the woman. She raised a trembling hand, her fingers barely able to stay lifted. Her lips moved, whispering words he could not understand. Her language was foreign, strange, but the desperation in her voice needed no translation. Still, he did not trust her. "Who are you?" His voice cut through the desert air, low and firm. The woman blinked slowly. She tried to answer, but the sounds that left her throat were broken and weak. The man's grip tightened on his weapon. A part of him wanted to turn away. Helping her could be dangerous. He had seen strange beings before, and kindness often led to regret. But something about this won her fragile state. Her hopeless eyes pulled at him. The vultures screamed again, this time swooping lower. One of them dove, wings spread wide, claws ready. The man reacted instantly. He raised his weapon, pulled the trigger, and fire spat into the sky. The blast lit the air, forcing the creature back. The sound echoed through the desert, loud and fierce. The other vultures flinched, but they did not fly away. They circled wider, their cries sharper. More impatient, the woman flinched at the noise, her body trembling. But her eyes remained locked on him. The man lowered the weapon, looking down at her once more. His mind raced. He could not fight the vultures forever. And leaving her here meant leaving her to a slow, brutal death. He crouched beside her, his shadow falling across her face. Her skin was pale, almost glowing under the sun, and strange markings ran along her arm, like symbols carved by fire. He reached out slowly, testing, and touched her wrist. Her skin was burning hot. Fever, she would not last long. He cursed under his breath. The woman's lips parted again, whispering softly. She said nothing he could understand, but her eyes pleaded. The man let out a deep sigh. Damn it. In one swift motion, he slid his weapon back over his shoulder and leaned down, lifting her into his arms. She was light, far lighter than he expected, as if her bones carried no weight. She gasped softly at the movement. her head resting weakly against his chest. The vultures shrieked angrily, their circle tightening. They could sense their prey slipping away. The man began to move, his boots crunching against the dry ground. He walked quickly, scanning the land for cover. There was nothing but endless rock and sand. The vultures grew bold. One swooped down, claws striking. The man twisted, raising his arm to shield her. The beast's talons scraped across his sleeve, tearing fabric, but missing flesh. He spun and fired, blasting fire into the air once more. The creature screamed, retreating. But more came. The desert was alive with their cries, their shadows cutting across the ground. The man kept moving, his legs pushing hard through the rough terrain. Each step was a battle, not just against the vultures, but against his own mind. Why was he doing this? Why risk his life for her? She was not human. She was nothing he knew, nothing he understood. And yet something inside him refused to abandon her. Maybe it was the way her family had left her. He had seen that look before, the look of someone thrown away like nothing. He knew that pain too well. The vultures dove again, faster, sharper. He fired once more, his weapon flashing bright. But his energy cells were running low. He could not keep this up forever. Ahead, he spotted jagged rocks rising from the desert floor. A small canyon, narrow but deep enough to hide. He quickened his pace, his arms tight around her fragile body. She stirred faintly, her eyes flickering open, catching glimpses of the vultures diving above. For a moment, terror filled her again, but then her gaze turned to him, to the stranger carrying her through danger. Her lips moved again, whispering something soft. Maybe a word of thanks. Maybe just a breath of hope. The man didn't answer. His focus was sharp, his eyes locked on the canyon ahead. The vultures cried once more, preparing for a final dive. But before they could strike, the man slipped into the shadow of the rocks, the walls rising tall around them. The narrow path shielded them from the open sky. For now, they were safe. The man set her down, gently against the stone, his chest rising and falling with heavy breaths. His weapon lowered, smoke still curling from its barrel. He looked at her again, sweat running down his face. "Your trouble," he muttered. The woman's lips curved faintly, almost a smile, though her eyes were still heavy with exhaustion. Above the canyon, the vultures screamed, circling in anger. They would not give up so easily, but neither would he. And so, in the heat of that alien desert, the story of the stranger and the abandoned woman began to take shape, not of prey and predator, but of two beings bound together by survival. The desert was still dangerous, the vultures still hungry. But for the first time since her family left, she was not alone. Escape from the vultures' 800 words, the narrow canyon gave them shelter, but only for a moment. The man leaned against the rocks, breathing hard. The alien woman rested weakly beside him, her skin still hot with fever. He could hear her shallow breaths echo against the stone walls. Above, the vultures screamed. Their shadows slid across the canyon floor, wings spread wide as they circled above the opening. They were not giving up. They were waiting. The man wiped sweat from his forehead and checked his weapon. The power cells were almost drained. Only a few shots left. Not enough to fight a whole swarm. His jaw tightened. If they stayed here, the vultures would find a way in. If they tried to leave, the sky would rain with claws and beaks. The woman's eyes opened slightly. She looked at him with fear. Then, at the shadows above, her lips trembled as she spoke in her alien tongue. He could not understand her words, but he understood the meaning. She was asking, "Are we going to die?" He did not answer. Instead, he crouched low and studied the canyon. The walls were steep, jagged, but there was a path leading deeper inside. Maybe, just maybe, there was another way out. "Stay quiet," he said firmly, though he knew she couldn't understand. His tone alone was enough. He lifted her into his arms again. She was light, fragile, like carrying a bundle of dry reeds. The moment he stepped forward, the vultures screamed louder, rained down as one of them clawed at the canyon's edge. Another swooped low, trying to reach them. The man raised his weapon and fired. The blast echoed like thunder, striking the rock and forcing the creature back. But that was another shot gone. Another drop of power wasted. He moved quickly, boots slamming against the ground. The canyon grew narrower, the walls pressing close, forcing him to squeeze through sharp stone. The woman whimpered softly, her body brushing against the rocks as he carried her. He ignored the cuts on his arms, the sting of the hot air, his mind focused only on moving forward. The vultures followed. Their cries echoed through the canyon, like demons in the sky. Talons scraped against stone, beaks snapping. They were trying to crawl through the tight spaces. Their hunger was merciless. The man pushed harder. He could feel the woman's heart beat against his chest, faint but steady. She clung to him weakly, her fingers curling into his jacket. Suddenly, the canyon opened wider again, too wide. The vultures dove in at once, screeching with fury. Their wings filled the air, sending waves of dust and sand crashing into the man's face. One came too close. Its talons slashed across his shoulder, tearing through cloth and skin. He growled in pain, stumbling but not falling. His grip on the woman stayed strong. He spun, raising his weapon, and fired point blank. The blast tore through the vulture's chest, sending it crashing against the rocks in a heap of smoke and feathers. The woman gasped, her eyes wide at the sight, but the others did not stop. If anything, they grew wilder, their cries sharper, angrier. The man's breaths came hard now. His strength was fading, his weapon nearly useless. He spotted a slope, ahead steep, rocky, but leading up. Maybe it led to safety. Maybe not. He had no choice. "Hold on," he muttered, tightening his grip. He climbed. The rocks cut into his hands, tore at his boots, but he pushed upward. The woman tried to help, her weak arms clinging tighter around his neck. Stones slipped under his feet, sending pebbles rolling down. Behind him, the vulture slammed against the canyon walls, trying to reach them. One swooped again, claws outstretched. He twisted, swinging his weapon like a club. The metal cracked against the creature's beak, sending it screeching away. Another lunged from the side, but he pulled himself higher, narrowly avoiding its strike. His muscles burned. Sweat stung his eyes. Every movement was agony. But still he climbed. Finally, he reached the top of the slope and pulled himself over. The ground leveled out. A wide plateau stretched before him, the desert endless once more. The vultures circled. Above, still crying out, but they could not dive as easily here. He had more space to move, more chance to fight back. The man set the woman down gently on the ground. She was trembling, her breaths quick. Her eyes looked at him with something new trust. He raised his weapon again, aiming at the vultures. "Come on then," he growled. But before they could attack again, a sudden gust of wind swept across the plateau. The ground shook faintly, and the vultures screamed in alarm. Something about the air had changed. Something in the desert itself had shifted. The vultures circled wider, their cries uneasy. And then, one by one, they pulled away, retreating into the distance until only silence remained. The man lowered his weapon, confused. Why had they left? What had scared them off? The woman coughed weakly, her eyes drifting to the horizon. Her lips moved, whispering words he could not understand. But her tone carried one thing: fear. The vultures were not the only danger in this desert. Something else was out there. Something even they were afraid of. The man's eyes narrowed as he looked across the empty land. His hand rested on his weapon, his mind sharp. He had saved her once, but he knew the real danger was just beginning. Secrets in the dark. 800 words night came quickly in the desert. The red sun fell beyond the horizon, and shadows swallowed the land. The man and the alien woman had walked until his legs threatened to give out. At last, he found a cave hidden between jagged cliffs. The opening was narrow, but inside stretched enough space for them to rest. He lowered her gently onto the stone floor. The cave was cool, a relief after the burning heat of the day. She shivered, though her body still weak and feverish. He searched his pack, pulled out a small container, and gave her a sip of water. She drank slowly, her lips trembling, as if each drop was life itself. The man sat across from her, watching in silence. The small fire he built flickered, painting the cave walls with orange light. The flames cast shadows that danced like ghosts. Outside, the vultures' cries had gone silent. But that did not mean they were safe. The desert had many hunters, and not all of them had wings. He leaned back against the stone wall, eyes narrowing at her. She looked fragile, yes, but there was something about her that did not fit. Her skin, pale and faintly glowing under the firelight. The strange markings that ran along her arms, faint but sharp, like scars made of light. And her eyes, they carried a weight he had seen only in soldiers who had survived too much. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice steady but low. The woman looked at him, her lips parting. Words left her mouth in her strange, alien tongue. He shook his head. "I don't understand." She frowned faintly, struggling to find strength. She pointed at herself, then touched one of the glowing marks on her arm. She whispered again, slower this time, her tone heavy with sorrow. The man tilted his head. He could not grasp her words, but the meaning pressed through her eyes. She was telling him something important, something about those marks, something about why her family had abandoned her. He leaned forward, resting his arms on his knees. "They left you 'cause of this, didn't they?" He gestured at the glowing marks. Her eyes lowered. She did not nod, did not speak. But the silence itself was enough. The fire crackled. For a while, neither of them spoke. The cave filled only with the sound of burning wood and her soft breaths. Then she lifted her arm, slowly turning it in the firelight. The marks along her skin brightened faintly, glowing like hidden embers. The man's eyes widened, his hand drifting toward his weapon without thinking. The woman flinched at the movement. Her eyes begged him not to fear her. He froze, then lowered his hand again. His chest rose with a heavy sigh. "Damn it," he muttered under his breath. The glow faded as she lowered her arm. She looked down, ashamed, as if the light itself was a curse. The man studied her longer. He remembered how the vultures had fled earlier. The way the air had shifted, as if the desert itself feared something. Maybe it wasn't the vultures they had escaped. Maybe it was her. She whispered again, her voice trembling. He couldn't understand her words, but he could hear the loneliness in them. The guilt. He rubbed his face with one hand, thinking. "So that's it," he murmured. "Your own people feared you." The woman looked at him sharply, her eyes wet. She nodded. Once, a small, broken movement. For the first time since he found her, the man felt a strange ache in his chest. He had seen people abandoned before. He had seen betrayal, cruelty, war. But to be left by your own family? To be cast away because of something you never chose? That was worse than death. The fire crackled louder, throwing sparks into the air. She leaned closer now, her voice softer, almost pleading. She spoke again, repeating one word several times. Her eyes locked onto his, desperate for him to understand. He listened, repeating the word under his breath, trying to shape it with his tongue. Reeses. Karis, her face lit faintly, nodding. That was her name. Karis, he said again, more firmly. Her lips curved into the smallest of smiles. Though her eyes still glistened with tears, the man leaned back once more. Well, Karis, you've got a hell of a curse, but you're still alive. That's something. Her gaze softened. For a moment, she looked less like prey, less like a burden, and more like someone holding on to hope. But outside the cave, the desert stirred. The man's ears caught faint noises, the crunch of sand shifting, the distant hum of engines. He froze, his body tense. He knew that sound. Hunter's Karis felt it too. Her eyes widened, her body stiff. She pressed her back against the cave wall. Whispering in fear, the man extinguished the fire quickly, plunging them into darkness. His hand went to his weapon, ready once again. In the black silence of the cave, two strangers sat side by side, an alien woman, marked by mystery, and a human, who had chosen to protect her. Both knew the night was not safe. Both knew the desert had more secrets waiting. And as the sound of hunters drew nearer, the darkness itself seemed to whisper a promise. The real fight was still to come. The chase, 800 words, the night air was still, but the silence did not last. From beyond the canyon, faint lights moved against the horizon, blue and red glows that flickered like eyes in the darkness. The sound followed soon after. Low and steady, the hum of engines drifting closer. The man crouched near the cave's mouth, eyes sharp. His grip tightened on his weapon. These were no vultures. These were machine ships or bikes cutting across the desert sand. Hunters stopped behind him. Karis pressed her back against the wall. Her breathing quickened, her glowing marks pulsing faintly. As fear stirred inside her, she whispered his name, not his true name, for she didn't know it, but the word she used for him now, human. Her voice trembled, heavy with warning. He glanced back at her and gave a small nod. He understood. Whoever was coming, they were not friends. The humming grew louder, turning into a roar as shapes finally broke through the night. For hover bikes slid across the sand, kicking up trails of dust. Each carried a figure clad in dark armor, their helmets glowing faintly. The hunters moved like predators who already knew where their prey was hiding. The man cursed under his breath. Somehow, they had tracked her here. "Stay behind me," he whispered, though he knew she could not understand his words. Still, the tone was enough. Karis clutched at the stone wall, her eyes locked on the advancing lights. The hunters stopped at the canyon entrance. Engines died, and silence returned. One of them raised a scanner, its light sweeping across the ground. The beam slid toward the cave, toward them. The man pulled Karis down lower, his hand resting over her shoulder to keep her still. The light passed dangerously close, then moved away. For a moment, he thought they were safe. Then came the voice. Cold, mechanical, echoing across the canyon, "She is here." Karis flinched, her glowing marks brightening as if her body itself responded to the call. The hunters turned their helms, the lights of their helmets flashing. Atia. They had found her. The man's heart slammed against his ribs. There was no more hiding. He grabbed Karis's arm, pulled her up, and whispered one word she didn't need to. Translate. Run. They bolted from the cave, their footsteps pounding against the stone. The hunters roared their engines back to life, the hoverbikes screaming as they shot forward. Beams of light cut through the night, sweeping over rocks and sand. The man dragged Karis through narrow paths, weaving between jagged cliffs. The hunters followed close behind. their bikes buzzing like angry insects. A sharp blast struck the stone near them, sending shards flying. Karis cried out, stumbling, but the man held her steady. He fired back, his weapon flashing bright in the darkness. The shot struck one of the hunter's bikes, sending it crashing into a rock in a fiery explosion. But there were still 3. The canyon walls shook with each blast. The hunters were not trying to capture, they were trying to kill. Dust filled the air, choking their lungs, blinding their vision. The man pulled Karis into a narrow split in the rocks, squeezing them both into the shadows. The hunters roared. Past, light slicing through the night, but the man knew it was only a matter of time before they doubled back. Karis trembled against him, her glowing marks bright and frantic. She whispered something again and again, the same word, almost like a prayer. He could not understand, but he could feel her fear. He pressed a hand gently against her shoulder. "I've got you." His voice was low, steady, even though his heart was racing. The hunters turned again, their engines echoing closer. The man made his choice. They couldn't keep running forever. They had to outsmart them. He spotted a narrow ridge above them. If they climbed, they could reach higher ground. From there, he could strike first. He pointed toward it, then pulled Karis along. The climb was steep, but she followed, her hands shaking as they grasped the rock. The hunters drew closer, the roar of their engines shaking the ground. Halfway up, a blast struck the stone near his foot. The rock cracked, nearly sending him down. He pulled himself up with a grunt, dragging Karis behind. The hunters were below now, their weapons raised, their voices shouting commands in a language he didn't know. He reached the ridge and pulled Karis over. They crouched low. The hunter's light swept across the canyon, searching. The man steadied his weapon, breath tight. He waited. 1, 2. When the nearest hunter passed below, he fired. The blast struck true, sending the bike spiraling. Out of control. The rider crashed hard into the sand. The other 2 spun upward, weapons firing back. Energy beams scorched the ridge, exploding rock around them. Karis screamed, clutching her ears as the blasts echoed. The man shielded her with his body, firing again and again until his weapon hissed empty. No more power. He cursed, tossed the useless weapon aside. The hunters closed in, and then something strange happened. Karis rose to her knees, her eyes glowing brighter than ever. The marks along her skin lit like fire. The air around her pulsed, a sudden wave of energy sweeping out. The hunters' bikes faltered mid-air, their engines stuttering. The riders jerked in confusion, their helmets sparking. One lost control and slammed into the cliff, shattering into flames. The last hunter pulled away, retreating into the distance. As if suddenly afraid, the desert fell silent again. Karis collapsed, her light fading. The man caught her before she hit the ground, staring at her with wide eyes. "What the hell are you?" he whispered. Her lips parted, whispering a single word. "Different." And then she fainted in his arms. The man held her close, his heart racing. He didn't know what power she carried. One thing was clear, the hunters would be back. And next time, they would bring more. The desert was silent again, but silence no longer felt safe. The man carried Karis in his arms, her body limp from exhaustion. Her glowing marks had faded back into faint lines, but he remembered what he had seen. That light, that energy, was not natural. It was power. He walked through the night until the first pale light of dawn touched the sky. The horizon stretched endless, broken only by jagged ruins that rose from the sand like the bones of giants. Towers half buried, walls shattered. Symbols carved into stone, too old for him to understand. The man slowed, studying them. A city, long dead, forgotten by time. Maybe here they could rest. He stepped carefully through the ruins, dust falling with each move. Strange carvings glowed faintly on the walls, the same color as the marks on Karis's skin. His chest tightened. This place was connected to her. He found shelter inside a broken temple, where stone pillars leaned against each other like tired soldiers. He laid Karis down gently on the smooth floor. She stirred, her eyes fluttering open. When she saw the carvings, her expression changed. She pushed herself up weakly, her hands trembling as they touched the symbols. Her glowing marks pulsed in response, as if the walls themselves recognized her. The man watched, uneasy. "What is this place?" Karis whispered something in her. Alien tongue, her voice soft, almost reverent. She traced the carvings, her eyes wet with something between awe and sorrow. She turned back to him, her hand pressed against her chest. Then she gestured to the walls, to herself, and back again. He frowned. "You belong here." She nodded slowly. Then, with effort, she whispered one word clearly in his language. Her voice cracked, but the sound was sharp enough to strike. Him. Chosen. The man froze. The word echoed in his head. Chosen. He stepped closer, his eyes scanning the carvings again. Figures were etched into the stone and alien woman, marked with glowing lines, standing against armies. Above her, a symbol of fire and light spreading across the stars. It hit him then. This wasn't just a ruin. This was a prophecy. Karis sat back, her shoulders trembling. She spoke again, faster now, her words broken but desperate. He caught only fragments: family, fear, power. He pieced it together slowly. Her family had known about this prophecy, known what she could become. And instead of accepting her, they had feared her. They had abandoned her so the vultures and the desert would finish what they could not. His jaw tightened. It was not just cruelty, it was betrayal on the deepest level. Karis's eyes filled with tears. She shook her head, her voice breaking. She never wanted this fate, never wanted to be chosen. The man knelt beside her, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You're not alone anymore." His voice was firm, steady, the same way he spoke to soldiers under fire. She blinked at him, her tears slowing. For the first time, she believed his words. But the moment of calm did not last. The ground shook beneath them. A deep rumble that made dust rain from the ceiling. Outside, engines roared again. The hunters had returned this time, more than before. The man cursed under his breath. He helped Karis to her feet, her glowing marks already sparking faintly in panic. Outside, the ruins lit with searchlights. Shadows of armored figures moved across the sand, their weapons raised, dozens of them. The man checked his weapon, still empty. He had nothing but grit and broken stone. He looked at Karis. Her eyes glowed faintly, her body trembling. She shook. Her head, she didn't want to use her power. She feared it, but the hunters were closing in. He grabbed her hand, pulling her toward the back of the temple. "We need another way out." They ran through crumbling halls, carvings glowing brighter. As Karis passed them, the walls seemed alive, responding to her presence. A low hum filled the air, vibrating through the stone. At the end of the hall, they found a chamber. A great circle carved into the floor, filled with symbols. As Karis stepped onto it, her marks flared bright. The symbols answered, lighting up like fire spreading across the stone. The man shielded his eyes. The light grew stronger, filling the chamber, pushing back the shadows. Karis stood in the center, her body shaking. The power was not something she wanted, but it was inside her, all the same. The ruin itself was waking, as if waiting centuries. For her return, the hunters burst into the chamber. Weapons ready. The man stepped forward, standing between them and her. You want her? You go through me. But before they could fire, Karis raised her hands. The glow from her body exploded. Outward, a wave of energy knocking the hunters off their feet. Their weapons shattered, their armor cracked. Screams echoed as they were hurled against the walls like broken dolls. The chamber shook with her power. The carvings blazed. Dust fell in sheets. The man turned, staring at her in shock. Her eyes glowed like fire, her hair lifted in the energy. Her voice echoing with a force that was not just her own. And then, as suddenly as it came, the light faded. Karis collapsed again, falling into the man's arms. Her body was weak, her breathing shallow. But her marks still glowed faintly. The hunters lay broken, but he knew more would come. He held her close, his voice rough. Whatever you are, whatever this prophecy means, you're not facing it alone. Her eyes fluttered open, just enough for a whisper. Promise. He met her gaze and nodded firmly. Promise. The ruins were quiet again, but the storm outside was only growing. The prophecy had awoken, and there was no turning back. The ruins trembled in silence after the blast of Karis's power. Broken hunters lay scattered across the chamber. Their armor cracked, their weapons useless. The air still shimmered faintly with energy, as though the stones themselves remembered the force that had passed through them. The man held Karis close. Her body was fragile in his arms, her breathing shallow. The glow of her markings had dimmed, leaving only faint light along her skin. She looked at him weakly, her lips parting as if to speak, but no words came. He brushed the dust from her hair and whispered firmly, "Save your strength." For a few heartbeats, it felt as if they had one. But the sound of vengeance shattered that hope. From outside the ruins, louder roars filled the airships, not bikes this time. Heavy, powerful. The hunters had called reinforcements. The man's jaw tightened. He could see flashes of light outside, the sky filling with ships dropping low over the desert. Dozens, maybe more. They weren't coming to capture her anymore. They were coming to end her. He looked down at her again. Karis's eyes fluttered. Open her gaze, heavy with fear. She shook her head weakly, as if to say she didn't want to fight. But he knew they had no choice. He placed her gently against the temple wall and stood, gripping the only weapon he had left a broken staff of, stone ripped from the ruins. It was nothing against their firepower, but he stood tall anyway. Outside, armored hunters poured into the ruins, their glowing helmets filling the chamber with light. Their leader stepped forward, voice cold and sharp. She cannot be allowed to live. The man planted his feet between them and Karis. Then you'll have to go through me. The hunters raised their weapons. Dozens of beams glowed, ready to fire. The man gripped the staff tighter. His heart pounded. He knew he couldn't win, but he refused to step aside. Behind him, Karis stirred. Her glowing marks pulsed faintly, flickering like embers. She watched him standing there, wounded, tired, weaponless, but unshaken, protecting her even when death was certain. Her chest tightened. For so long, she had been abandoned. For so long, she had been told she was cursed. Yet here was a human, someone not even of her blood, standing as her shield. Her fear turned into something else. Strength. She pushed herself to her knees, her hands pressing against the glowing carvings on the wall. Energy sparked beneath her palms. The ruins responded. The floor hummed, the air vibrated, and light began to rise around her. The hunters noticed, their weapons shifting toward her. Stop her. They fired. Beams of energy cut through the chamber. The man spun, blocking as many as he could with the broken staff, but too many were aimed at Karis, and then the light exploded. Her markings blazed like fire, brighter than before, brighter than the sun itself. the chamber filled with a roaring wave of energy. The hunters were thrown back, their beams swallowed by the storm of light. The walls of the ruins shone, every symbol burning with ancient power. Karis rose slowly from the ground, her feet barely touching the stone. Her eyes glowed pure white, her voice echoing with a force that was not only hers, but of something greater, something the ruins themselves. Carried for ages, the hunters screamed as the light struck them. Their ships outside faltered engines, shutting down, metal tearing apart in the sky. One by one, they fell to the desert, exploding in flames. The man shielded his eyes, his body trembling under the force of it. But even through the storm, he saw her Caris, no longer weak, no longer abandoned, but powerful beyond measure. Her voice cut through the chaos, sharp and unyielding. No more. The light surged outward, a final wave of energy that swept across the desert, consuming everything that threatened her. When it finally faded, silence fell. The hunters were gone. The ships were ash and smoke. Only the ruins and the endless desert remained. Karis collapsed again, the glow fading from her body. The man rushed to her, catching her in his arms before she hit the stone. She was pale, weak, but alive. He held her close, his breath uneven. "You did it," he whispered. "You saved us." Her eyes opened faintly. She shook her head, her voice soft. "Not me. You." He frowned. "Me." Her trembling hand touched his chest. "You believed." He understood then. Her power had always been there, but it was his refusal to abandon her that gave her the strength to use it. In a world where her own family had left her for dead, one stranger had given her hope. And hope had become salvation. He pulled her closer, his voice steady. "You're not alone anymore. Not ever." She closed her eyes, a faint smile touching her lips. For the first time since her abandonment, she felt safe. The man looked out across the desert. The sun was rising again, painting the sky with gold. The night was over. The hunters were gone. But he knew others would come. The prophecy was awake now, and nothing could stop it. Still, he didn't care. Because she was alive. And as long as she lived, he would fight. In a galaxy filled with betrayal and fear, a single act of human kindness had changed everything. And so, the story of Karis, the abandoned alien woman and the human who became her salvation, was only beginning.